Today I'm going to show you a dinner roll recipe. Now I've already put one out on my YouTube channel, but this one's even better than the old one. Everybody in my family love these. They're soft and their crust is real nice and golden. So first, 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry or instant yeast right into the bowl of our stand mixer. You can do this by hand even if you didn't have a stand mixer. And warm it out of water. Then I'm going to mix this just for a little while. I have the dough hook attached. Regular old, dough hook. Now I will add 2 tablespoons of sugar. This will tell us if our yeast is alive. Sugar is what feeds the yeast. And we can mix this for a couple of seconds. Now, I'll let you see this here. So we're going to let this get a little foamy, about 5 to 10 minutes. I can usually tell, and I'm pretty confident that mine is alive, but what you should do is let this rise up. And I'm using warm water, not cold or hot, because that'll kill your yeast. So what we're going to do now, so I'm going to stick this back in the refrigerator, because yeast is meant to be refrigerated to keep its power alive. Yeast produces carbon dioxide and it lifts up your bread, but it does not make the bread dough a larger amount. It just lifts it up and puts air bubbles into it. So like when you cut into bread, it's not just one big hunk of bread, it's got little tiny bubbles, also known as a crumb. So I'm pretty confident that my yeast is alive, so I'm not going to prove it. So what I'm going to do is add in my vegetable oil and my butter. This is soft, it's mushy, so take a couple of seconds just to stir that up. It'll look like the butter is not trying to incorporate, but once you add in the flour and everything, it will. So I'm going to take this off just to make it easier. See how that butter's still kind of hunky? It's soft, so when we add in and knead it with the dough hook, that'll break it up. So I have my salt and flour, bread flour, and use bread flour. Higher percentage of gluten. If you use all-purpose or cake flour, that would be porous, and the gluten and yeast aren't going to work together, and it will just make a large bubble through your bread. And the more percentage of gluten, the more chewy it is. So I'm going to gradually add this. I'm going to add in a good amount. So that's about half or a quarter, maybe half or a quarter. We're going to just let it mix. And we're not going to let it create a dough yet, because if it gets too stiff and you try and add water, you'll never succeed with trying to add water to a stiff dough. So that's why we'll always use that. I'm going to get a spatula so that we can scrape everything down. So this is starting to get more thick. So that will add a bit more. And we're just going to gradually add it. Take your time with adding flour, because if it gets too stiff, then you'll just have to start over, because it's not workable. So I'm going to lock down the bed. And we're just going to let it mix. Let me just break this down a bit. thick soup in the middle and very thick dough around the edges. So that's why I'm gonna scrape. Always scrape your bowl even when you're doing cakes or anything with a stand mixer. It's just better too. So I'm gonna let this mix. And that's a bit more. Now I'm gonna add more. Now how you measure is all you can kind of demonstrate. You fill it up to a heaping cup, and then you take, I don't have one right now, but you could use an icing spatula or the back of a knife and scrape it off. That's knife back. And then you're sure that it's quite level, and then it will be quite equal. Now most people are using scales these days because it's more accurate, because you never know with how wet your flour is and the moisture. So that's why most people are using scales. But I like just cups. That's what I've been used to. See, now our dough is starting to come together, and if you come over here, you can start to see I'm gonna lock it down. Soon it will get a lot more sticky, and then we'll have to add that flour in. But the reason why I mixed the salt and the flour together is because if you mix the salt directly in with yeast, it'll kill your yeast. Salt and yeast do not mix very well. And if you don't have any yeast and it's not working, then it doesn't pump those air bubbles and it'll be quite dense. And then it won't be very good. So now you can see how it's starting to stick. So it started to come together. And that's how quick it does it. So now I'm gonna open her up and see how sticky that is. It's left a little bit on my fingers. So that's why I'm going to add another good amount of flour. Then I've got about that much left that I can use if I need. So now it's starting to be free in the swirling around. It'll pick up all this flour eventually. And if it doesn't pick it up all right now, then you can always use it when you need it or when you make the dinner rolls, when you're shaping, or if you need more, it's there. But I'm going to start to number 2. But I'll be back when it comes together. So I've added a couple more bits of flour. That's all that I have left. But it may be different in your kitchen. So just add it in gradually. And don't just be tempted to dump everything in. So now, here's what my dough ball looks like. And I'll let you come up and see inside the bowl. I'm starting to clean the sides. Just the bottom I've started to clean up. But don't be tempted to just turn it all the way up, because let's think. Does a person, when they need it, like, I'll show you. Does a person, when they need it, do they need it like, and need it as fast on max speed? No, you usually need it just about this speed. Or if you're doing it for the French way, you would smack it and then roll. Now you could do this by hand and set a timer for 8 minutes. And a way to also check at the end is when you're done, make a little window and see how that broke on. It shouldn't be breaking that fast when you stretch it. You could do this by hand, which I may end up doing, but I think I'll probably just let it knead in the stand mixer. But just keep it on speed 1. Knead it just like this. If you were to knead it by hand. But just kneading, what you do, I'll do it with one hand to demonstrate better, is you pull up a section and push. Pull, push. Then once it creates a log, pull up the next section. So created a log. Next section. And if I need more of this flour, I can always use it. Now, here's a trick if your mixer starts to struggle. If you have one of these scrapers, you can use it. These are also used sometimes on cakes. But if you have more something like this is called a bench scraper. So when you have flour and stuff, you take it and use it. Take it and scrape flour up under it. So a trick is you can either use this or the bench scraper to cut up little bits, like about that big, and put it into your stand mixer while it's running to create a ball so it'll have time to ball it up. And then you can also, a trick, if you don't have any of these, to cut it without a knife. I'm sure you have a knife, but sometimes dough is stubborn and it doesn't want to cut. So then you take your pointer finger and your thumb and you stick it right in the middle of both. Then you take a couple more fingers and you're just going to squish hard. And it just rips right off. So then, while it's running, lock it down. Then just add it on speed 1. No need to go fast. Once it starts to form a ball like this, I'll let you see it up here, if you would like to see it. See how it's becoming a ball? Cut this in half, then you add it in, and then it creates a ball like this, and it masses that in, and it all just comes together. So I'll come back in 8 minutes when it's fully kneaded. I'll set the timer for 8 minutes, and then I'll be back to show you what it will look like. So, halfway through I took it out and thought I would just knead it by hand because I like to knead bread dough by hand. Now, you will probably wondering what the window pane test was. And so I'm going to make it into a ball. To make bread dough into a ball is you can either take the corners and wrap them in to the middle and just poke them in, and then flip it over and do that motion and make it into a ball. But my favorite way to do it is you take your fingers like this and tuck them in and in and in, and then just turn it. So now, for the window pane test, you pick up a section about that big, and then you stretch. I'm going to give it about 4 more kneads, and I'll show you how the French method is. So, what it is you take your hand. I'm using my right. I'll do either back and forth with my right or left hand. So, what you do is you pick it up, and you hit it, and it spreads it out. And then you roll it up with your left hand, and then you do that motion. So then, the more you practice, the faster you can go, and then you can. Alright, now let's check it. Oh yeah, see how that's holding up? That's good. So now we've developed enough gluten strands. Now I'm going to say about, in an oiled bowl, up to 40 minutes to an hour of rising time. So I'm going to take the bowl and I'm going to take a little bit of our vegetable oil. You could use a pastry brush, paper towel, or just your hands. But my favorite way to do it is to take the dough and spin it around and around. spin it around inside, so then the dough and the bowl is oiled. So now put the lid on it. Stick that in. And then you can either use a floured or damp towel. But I like to use saran wrap. It's a pain in the butt to get out of the container. But it usually works great on bread. So what I do is I take some cling wrap. Stuck. I don't use it very often unless I'm making bread, but it's not my best friend. Alright. I get a large piece, large enough to cover the bowl. I'll be back when I finally deal with the saran wrap. So now I have a toothpick. You may be wondering, why would he have a toothpick with dough and saran wrap? So I've tightly covered this. And now just for steam, because that oil and everything and moisture will evaporate and the crust. And then you can't see through. So then we're just going to poke this a couple of times to make sure that all of that, everything that comes out will be able to come out. So I'll be back when it's ready, about doubled in size. I'll show you how to test it when it's done too. So there's the dough, and I'll be back soon. Alright, so my dough has doubled in size, and if you can hear, I will show you how to test it. So mine took about 15 minutes. 50 minutes now. It depends on your kitchen now if I poke that. See how it just slowly comes back. So that's ready. So since I have a little bit of leftover of my flour and salt, I'm just gonna, well, you know what I'll do is I'll do it this way. This gives you more even spreading. Sort of toss it so. Pull it out. Then we're going to expel all the gases. Now it's flat, so I'm going to stretch, put in the middle, stretch, put in the middle. Now, flip, shape into a ball. Now, I happen to do this maybe a different way than you. What I do is I get my rolling pin. Rolling pin, where are you? Here he is. And I roll it now just into a long rectangle or square, whichever it comes out into. Now if you have to, you can let this rest for about 5 minutes and it'll go a lot easier. But, you know, I'll just go ahead and do it. If you let it rest, it'll make it a lot easier to roll. So I would say, if you're not very well with rolling, then let it go for about 5 minutes. Now, not rolling to the edges, just about an inch away. If you come here, I'll show you that. So, what you do is you put it right here, about maybe an inch of space, and then you roll up, not to the edge, inch of space again, and you pick it up, and go again, not to the edge. But you can just keep going in it. Rolls. Got an air bubble here that I'll pop. Another air bubble. See, it's producing that CO2, So when it goes up, it'll put a lot more air bubbles into it. So I like to roll it and then cut it into shapes. So a bit more roll here. Now this should be good here. You can use this or this again. Either one. So what I like to do is, again, everybody does this differently. Cut. Cut. Alright, so let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 times 4. So about 20. So make a hot dog. Now they don't have to be exactly equal. You want to get them as equal as you can, but it's not like it has to be equal, but it's better because it makes a better appearance of your dinner rolls. So just try and get it as equal as you can. And now I'm going to take these and cut them so that they're all little pieces. Cut. Now, if you did not have either one of these again, a knife would do. They look kind of like shortbread cookies. So, we're just going to cut this up all into our pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, start to cut tiny. So I need 10 more. If you can get it out of your dough. If you can't get it out of it, that's okay. Just cut them into smaller pieces. And you see something, a big hog, then you can usually sacrifice 2 just to make it. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 19. I think 1 under should be okay. Alright. So maybe into these, and then so to shape your dinner rolls, you're gonna pinch. I like to pinch and just pinch, 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 and then swirl with your hand, and a little bitty smush. And then once we get them all into the pan, I'm gonna shape them all. Once we get them into the pan, I'll be back. So my dinner rolls are all done and they're in the dish, my cornbread dish. It's a large roaster. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put them into a warm oven. Yeah, that's good. Just warm, not hot. As low as you can get your oven. Leave the door open for a couple of seconds so it's not too hot so it won't kill your yeast. See, the whole point of baking is to kill your yeast and for them to go up and be nice and airy and cooked through. So I'm just gonna let it be warm so that it'll rise up quicker and be ready in time for dinner. It's just warm, so it'll take about 20 minutes to an hour, but I'm only gonna let these go 20 minutes. And they're in the oven so I want them to be done in time for dinner. So I shaped them and everything the last time you saw me shaping them. So now I put them all into the dish and let them rise. It can take 20 minutes up to an hour. Mine, I put them in the lowest setting on the oven and opened up the door for a couple of minutes until it got down to 120, and then shut them until they were somewhat risen. And then I preheated the oven with them in it so that they'll start to rise up more. So that when it reached 350, I put it in for 20 minutes. And then when 5 minutes was left, I buttered them. And then when all the butter evaporated and made a softer crust, I pulled them out and put a little bit more butter on them.